We now reach the next step in the software lifecycle, and we talk about the Systems Requirement Specification, often abbreviated as SRS, and this is the master document for a project. This is where we go from the abstract user needs to the very concrete things that our system needs to be able to do to meet the needs of our user. Again, just as a reminder, this is my usual disclaimer, this is a simplified recipe for the needs of a class. In the real world, you need a lot more than what I describe here, but we cover here the basics just to illustrate the concepts here. So this is a V model, this is a life cycle design, and we're now at this next step down. We've dealt with the use cases and the user needs. We're now talking about systems requirements. The systems requirement specification is a bridge. It's a bridge between the informal discovery phase of a project where the user needs are identified and the actual design of the software itself. It is the master document for a project, and it captures in a structured format all the necessary information from the discovery phase of the project. So here's where we translate the amorphous user needs to the concrete things that our software must be able to do. So the role of this document is manifold, multifold. There are sort of many uses for it, but it is really the input to the rest of the project's design documents. It's also addressed to the users. They can ensure that their needs are addressed by the design and they are addressed accurately. And it clarifies formally and in writing the informal understanding arrived during this informal process. And in addition, it is input to everything else. So the software design will use this as its input. The validation plan will use this as its input. The delivery plan will use this as its input. The risk management plan will use this as its input. So this is like the master document, the initial big document that captures the essence of the project. In a large organization, and whenever you see this picture on the top left, think about communication problems. Each of these documents are created by separate or overlapping teams, and each document must provide sufficient information to act as input to the next phase of the project. So you have to capture enough of the details of the previous step. And it's critical to ensure there's no information loss, because if the information doesn't carry forward, then of course our design will not reflect the needs of our user. The other aspect, and this is we're going into a little of the regulatory guidance here, the QMS document from the IMDRF, we have to worry about these two different worlds, the patient safety and clinical considerations and the technology considerations. So we have both clinical and home environments potentially. Our software could be used at home or it could be used in hospitals. Those are the pictures there. And in addition to the functional requirements, there are requirements that include the consideration of the patient or the user safety. So some requirements originate from the risk management process. This is critical, that evaluate the risk to the patient and users, and which may identify medications that become part of the requirements. If this happens, we have a problem. Therefore, we need to add another requirement to ensure that we don't have that problem. And we have to add additional considerations. This is from the IMDRF, to maintain data integrity throughout the process. So this is the patient considerations, the clinical considerations. We also have technology considerations. Our software is this dual citizen. It's medical and software. So this is the software end. The underlying platform and the operating system must be considered as part of the requirements. We have to define, again, non-functional aspects, things like performance-related requirements for the hardware, the means of connecting or networking to the wider environment. Those are things we have to consider. And we have to think about all the stakeholders. This is where we ended up at the end of the user needs sections, whether they're patients, clinicians, users, IT managers, others. They have to be all involved in the requirements process. And this is the beginning of the story, if you wish. Everybody has to look at this document, all the stakeholders, to make sure that their needs are reflected. And since this is written from the perspective, this is written by the engineer, by the designer, from the perspective of the user. And the user needs to be able to read it and say, okay, when you say I have this need, this is in fact the need that I have. And you have implemented enough pieces, you've made enough requirements to meet my need. You know, when you say this should take no more than 2 seconds, that 2 seconds is an accurate number. Maybe 2 seconds is too long. Maybe you have 5 seconds here, so maybe you have too stringent a set of criteria. So this is where we are. We're at the start of this process, and this is the process. We're both medical and software. We have to worry about the medical aspects and the software aspects and pull them all together to create a set of requirements. The things that our software must do to meet the needs of its user. In the next segment, we'll actually walk through a template for creating this type of document. Thank you.